Now on Indianapolis This Week. Ballot battle, reaction to the Indiana Election Commission's decision on the ballot challenge to Senate candidate Todd Young. Picking a justice, the fight brewing over the next Supreme Court justice, and why Indiana's Republican senator says a vote could still happen on a nominee. And chasing Carrier, the work to possibly save 1,400 Indianapolis jobs or to get the company to repay tax money.
From RTV6, Indianapolis This Week.
And thank you so much for joining us here on Indianapolis This Week after what has been an extraordinary week for politics. And we're starting with the race for Indiana Senate and that incredible marathon hearing at the Indiana Election Commission on Friday. The commission heard more than 4 hours of testimony before finally casting tie votes, essentially allowing Todd Young to stay on the May primary ballot. It was a contentious, snarky, and sometimes nasty hearing. Our State House reporter Katie Hines sat through each and every minute of it.
I don't accept them as exhibits, but I'm just, Mr. Chairman, you set the rules of this hearing, and I'm asking you to follow them. Let's cut him off.
Republican Representatives Todd Young and Marlin Stutzman will face off in the May primary in what's expected to be a close race and a tough fight. The Stutzman campaign's decision to join Democrats in challenging Young's candidacy hasn't gone over well with some of the Republican Party, and the tension was evident between representatives for both camps as well as Democrats in this room.
Todd Young did not have the requisite number of petition signatures certified by the counties in the 1st Congressional District. He didn't have them certified by the deadline. His team went in there to argue that everything should be rehabilitated and it was someone else's fault.
You always knew we had enough signatures. This is about the Democrats, and Marlin Stutzman knew that they couldn't beat Todd Young in an election. They engaged in these tactics to drag us into this process because they know they can't beat Todd in an election.
The Indiana Democratic Party is reviewing whether to appeal the decision, which could ultimately wind up in court. The primary is scheduled for Tuesday, May 3rd. Jason.
Thank you so much, Katie. The commission also rejected challenges to presidential candidates Ted Cruz and Marco Rubio. Those birther challenges centered on claims that neither's qualified to be president under the natural-born citizen definition. Take note of this, though. 2 commission members did express severe reservations as to whether Ted Cruz is a U.S. citizen. Democrat Tony Long saying it won't be resolved until it finally reaches the Supreme Court. And we want to bring in our political insiders here on a Sunday morning. Republican Jennifer Hollowell, good morning. Democrat Dan Parker, Mary Beth Schneider, of course. And Mary Beth, let's start with you. Is this Todd Young challenge over?
It may be over legally. They may pursue it, they may not, but I don't think it's over politically. I think it caused some real damage within the Republican Party, and it also has some long-term consequences on enforcing that 500 vote signature on the petition limit going forward. I think it'll be interesting to see what happens down the road.
Dan, your reaction when you heard the commission's ruling yesterday?
Well, I wasn't surprised. Mary Beth has sat through plenty of these and knows that there's a lot of 2-to-2 ties. I thought it was, for a Republican Party that trumpets the rule of law and, throws out the words election fraud all the time, I thought this was a really bad decision. He didn't have enough. That was the reality. The Republican establishment looked the other way, and they wanted to put their guy on the ballot. I agree with Mary Beth. There was severe tension between the Stutzman and Young camps. How does that play out in the primary? Jennifer can answer that a lot better than I can, but it was a bad day for actually following the law. He didn't have enough. He didn't count. It was his own incompetence. There were 15 candidates that got the job done. He was the only one in front of the Election Commission because he didn't have enough.
Jennifer, your turn.
He had 501 signatures, and that was recorded in the statewide voter registration system, which isn't official.
It's not official when it comes to the reports.
It's what the clerks use. It's what everyone uses for your voter file list and everything else. So I wasn't surprised by it either, because I do think that they met the criteria. It does galvanize support, I think, on both sides in the Republican camps. But I think that the biggest thing coming out of this is it's clear who the strongest candidate in this race is, because Democrats want to spend time trying to find a needle in a haystack and spend time and legal fees, precious resources to try to take someone off the ballot. Todd Young beat Barron Hill in the congressional race 6 years ago by 10 points, and they are really concerned about him being their opponent.
But Stutzman sided with the Democrats on this. Were you surprised by how contentious it got between those two camps yesterday?
Well, I wasn't really surprised by it, no. And I do think it's interesting that the Stutzman campaign got into it. Senator Dan Coates expressed some concerns about their decision to do so a few days ago, and, I don't think that they added a new argument, but clearly, they're fierce competitors, and folks, having no opponent is your best opponent, right? So everyone was trying to not have to be on a ballot against Todd Young.
Absolutely, yeah. Todd Young comes out, looking like the guy that everybody sees as the front runner, and so that cements it, whether it was ever true before. Now it's true now, but it's also true. I was, following Twitter yesterday, there were an awful lot of people who were angry at Marlin Stutzman for pursuing this, but there were also people who were feeling that the rule of law was not being followed. And that was that Tea Party base that really supports Marlin Stutzman, and they felt quite agitated and fired up yesterday.
At the end of the day, you're not going to disenfranchise thousands of voters who've signed these petitions to get someone on the ballot.
You throw out that word disenfranchisement, okay? No voter was being disenfranchised.
Well,
your party does a great job. You guys do a great job of doing that at the polls.
You're
okay,
comparing apples and shovels.
First of all, your SVRS, the Indiana Election Division sends out a report every morning and says,
and the
this
report
is
says
not
501.
official.
The report says
this
501.
Is not official.
Okay? The report says 501. And
Jennifer,
so once you're certified, and he was certified, they're trying to kick him off the ballot, right? He's already certified.
Wall, but the reality is she's part of the establishment
you reasonably
that
believe
to defend
that you're certified. If you say I'm certified, I reasonably believe that I am certified.
At the end of the day, he had 498.
Why would you think that you're not?
He had 498.
So, the Election Commission.
There's 501 on the list, and
no,
that is the same list. That is the same list that everyone used.
By the way,
to
every
determine
campaign,
whether someone is a registered voter. It's the same list that the Democrat Party uses to build their
We're all getting a glimpse of
every campaign that gets
Friday's
these
commission
back
hearing.
does one thing before they turn them in. They count the number that were certified, not the number that was turned in, not the number that's on the report. You count. And Todd Young can't count to 500.
They counted 501. They had 501 certified by clerks.
Because there was 498.
And they moved
This
forward.
represents the 2-2 tie pretty well. On the political side of things, Mary Beth, establishment candidates haven't been obviously doing well or had a lot of buzz going into this election season. Does this establish Todd Young as that establishment candidate, and does Stutzman get a little boost from it?
Maybe nationally the establishment candidates haven't done that well, but I think in Indiana the establishment candidates actually have been doing pretty well. There is on the Democrat side, Barron Hill is very establishment, and I think Todd Young, Marlin Stutzman, sitting members of Congress. Now Stutzman a little less so because he has a history of poking his finger in the eye of people like John Boehner on the floor of the House. But they're still sitting congressmen. I don't think that the establishment in Indiana needs to worry. But I think they both need to worry about this problem is going to continue going on. Back in the 90s, they changed the Election Commission to give it a 2-2 tie to almost ensure this kind of thing. Now there's precedent for saying, well, 498, 497, 501, we want choices on the ballot. And so we're going to go ahead and keep a major candidate. I don't know that they would have done the same. If this was some guy down ballot in some minor race falling short, I don't think it would have taken 4 hours. It would have taken 20 minutes to kick him off.
And if it's somebody that they thought they could beat, they wouldn't challenge him in the first place.
There does need to be changes to the system. This process is ripe for fraud because I went out and collected petitions for the candidate that I've been supporting this year, and I was asked for identification and to sign for it in one county.
This debate continues right now, both on air and on Twitter right now at Indy This Week. We're definitely not done with this debate by any stretch of the imagination. Still to come, here's strong words from Senator Dan Coates about the ballot challenge and the Republican battle to replace him. Plus, what would it take for him to vote on a Supreme Court nominee from President Obama? We'll ask him next. You're watching Indianapolis This Week on RTV6. Welcome back to Indianapolis This Week. In the fight over the future for the U.S. Supreme Court, the nation saying its final goodbye this weekend to longtime Supreme Court Justice Antonin Scalia. He died last weekend in Texas at the age of 79, and within just a few hours, minutes really, of his death, the debate was already underway on who would nominate his successor. Republican leader Mitch McConnell saying no vote should be taken until after the presidential election. We're joined this morning by Senator Dan Coats. Senator, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you. Pleasure.
Let's talk about the sudden vacancy on the Supreme Court. It is all the talk in Washington, all across the country right now. You have said, and I want to get this right, the American people should determine the next Supreme Court justice by their vote in November. So you don't even want the president to bring a nomination forward.
Well, the president knows the nomination's not going to go forward unless he brings somebody that basically stands for the Constitution, is equal or close to Justice Scalia. During his presidency, he has appointed 2 to the Supreme Court that basically fall in his camp. The president's defiance of, I think, the Constitution and bypassing the Congress on so many executive orders and so forth, a major issue before the Supreme Court, he's going to send somebody up that is dead on arrival. And why go through all that? You know, when the shoe was on the other foot, Republicans were in charge. The Democrats were saying, oh, in election year, never. You can't bring somebody up in election year. It gets too political. Well, clearly, this is about the most political election year that any of us have seen in a long time. So I think it's important to let the American people see this as an issue regarding the power of the president versus the power of the people's elected representatives. And that's why I think it's just meaningless for the president to throw somebody out there. They'll make it into a political issue, but maybe the American people ought to be the ones to decide how we go forward. It's 4-4 right now in the court. We're losing a giant of intellect, a giant of faithfulness to the Constitution, and it's clear the president's not going to appoint somebody that goes against his view of the Constitution, even though he was a constitutional law lawyer. Some questions there about what his intent was.
We had posted your statement on Twitter at Indy This Week. A lot of our viewers and followers then commented and said that the American people have voted for this already. They voted for it in 2008. They voted for it in 2012 by electing President Barack Obama twice to that post. Your reaction to that?
Well, there's 2 things here. It's not just the president who's in the White House. It's also the kind of person that he puts forward. Clearly, with the vacancies on the Democrat side, the president appointed 2 Supreme Court justices. I wasn't in the Senate at the time, but appointed 2 that followed his views. In this case, in my opinion here, we have a president who has, as I said, trying now to fill a slot by someone who is of the ideology and the brilliance of Justice Scalia, and the consistency of being faithful to the Constitution as written, and the president's totally on the other side of that. So it's a non-starter, given the fact that the Senate is controlled by Republicans and believes that this issue is so important to the division of powers and faithfulness to the Constitution, as it specifically limits what the president has violated, that it ought to be given up to the people.
What about someone like Judge Jane Kelly on the 8th Circuit, Greencastle, Indiana native, and you would have a chance to at least debate someone like that while you are still serving in the Senate?
Well, I have also said that if the president does nominate someone and that person meets the criteria of what I think a Supreme Court justice ought to have, that the experience, the temperament, the judgment, and the faithfulness to the Constitution, and it comes before the Senate, certainly I will then set this aside and not just have a blind no, but say, okay, that this person's here, we have to make a decision, and let's evaluate that person. I had the privilege of shepherding Congressman Judge Alito through the confirmation process, and I had learned a lot from that and named a lot of criteria in terms of what a judge ought to have in order to be a faithful lifetime constitutional justice in the Supreme Court, and I would apply those same principles to whoever the president brings up.
Much more to come on this debate in the days and weeks surely ahead. Let's talk about the race to potentially replace you now. The State Election Commission looking, of course, at the ballot issue that has been tied to the Todd Young campaign and whether or not he has fallen a couple signatures short in one of his districts. Your reaction to all this?
It's clear to me they were just trying to take out the guy they thought was going to be the toughest to beat in this. What surprised me was that our other candidate jumped on with the Democrats. Of course, who wouldn't want to be the only guy in the ballot? But, you know, Indiana needs to have a choice in terms of who follows on in the United States Senate. And to take that choice away without even knowing the facts, jumping on it, and some others here in the Republican Party did that also, jumping on Todd, was unseemly and I think unfair.
You said that Todd Young was the strongest choice. Would you endorse him ahead of the primary?
I've said I wouldn't endorse, but I also said that I want this to be a fair choice for the Hoosier people, that I shouldn't be the one dictating who should be that candidate. But this was unseemly, and I think so self-serving that I may reevaluate that. But I haven't done this so far.
Speaking of potential endorsements, the Republican presidential race right now really wide open as it crisscrosses across the country, possibly putting Indiana in play come May. Yeah. Is there a chance that you would endorse a presidential candidate ahead of the primary here?
Yeah, there is a chance. I do think the public is looking, Republicans are looking for a new face. I think the public's looking for a new face. We have a talented group of up-and-comings, many of them with good experience, but not viewed as tired old establishment. We're in a position, I think, to do very well because I think tired old establishment applies to the other party this time. And so I'd like to see somebody who reaches out to the younger generation, has new ideas, new dynamics. I think when Marco Rubio said this election's not about the past, it's about the future, it really struck home because I think the Democrat Party is clearly about the past given their candidates, and I think we have a real shot at being clearly about the future.
Senator Dan Coates, thanks so much for being here with us. Good to see you. And still to come, 1,400 Indianapolis jobs carried away. We're digging deeper into the fight over Carrier and the tax money given to the company. You're watching Indianapolis This Week on RTV6. Welcome back. The other big news we've been digging into this week, Carrier's decision to shut down its Indianapolis plant, costing 1,400 workers their jobs. That announcement grabbed the attention of presidential candidates, including Donald Trump, who's suggesting taxing Carrier products that come back to the U.S. from Mexico to be sold. And Democrat Bernie Sanders expressing support for union workers. The other big question, what happens now with Carrier's job training grants from the state and the stimulus tax credit from the federal government? We're finally hearing from the White House about that $5.1 million in stimulus tax credits to Carrier. A White House spokesperson telling Indianapolis This Week they would not comment on specifics, but did highlight Indiana's improving economy, saying unemployment is down to 4.4%. 291,000 jobs have been created since 2010 and more than 80,000 manufacturing jobs added since the height of the recession. So what about the state's efforts to keep those jobs or get the job training money back? Rafael Sanchez standing by with that.
Joining us now is the Deputy Chief of Staff for Governor Mike Pence. Matt Lloyd, welcome to the program.
Thanks, Rafael.
Was Indiana duped by Carrier when they asked for grants and now they're moving to Mexico?
Yeah, the governor was, and I think as well as the rest of the state, was certainly surprised. We had no warning that Carrier was leaving. And look, Governor Pence, I think, speaks for everyone in the administration and everyone across Indiana. That our hearts go out to these workers who lost their jobs, these hardworking Hoosiers. But from day one, the governor was engaged and involved. And the good news is we're not Illinois. We actually have more jobs than we have people to fill them. So he ordered the Department of Workforce Development to reach out to these workers, which they have already started doing, to work with them to pair them with good-paying jobs in the state that they be qualified for. And we're confident we can make that happen.
You sent a letter with other officials, yes. Congressman Carson, Senators Donnelly and Coates.
Yeah.
Are you expecting Carrier to come to the table and at least listen to an appeal from the governor?
Well, you know, Governor Pence believes that jobs are a bipartisan issue, which is why he sent a letter with Senator Coates, Senator Donnelly, and Mayor Hogsett. We felt like we wanted to show a united front to Carrier, that we wanted these jobs to stay in Indiana. We believe we have the best workforce in the country.
But are you expecting a meeting? Are you expecting some sort of marathon session where we'll all get together?
That would be the point of sending the letter. We were hoping that they would reach back to us and work with us so that we could figure out a way for them to stay in Indiana. We believe that our workers are some of the best in the country, and They have nothing to lose by leaving.
On the other economic front, the issue of Dow to move its headquarters to Delaware, we'll keep a division in Indianapolis. Is that a sign at all that we're struggling?
Absolutely not, Raphael. Anytime you have a merger like this, you have two giant companies that come together, there's always going to be overlap in jobs. So our hope was that we would be able to keep those 1,500 jobs that are at Dow presently in Indiana. And so Governor Pence and the administration were laser focused on making sure that happened, and today is a great day for Indiana because those jobs are staying here. And
can we compete with Mexico and Japan? I know the governor has done many mission trips in hopes of bringing jobs here, but we're looking at jobs in Indiana where they pay $30 to $6. Will we be able to compete in the future? 30 seconds.
Look, we're dealing with a president in Washington D.C. that has put an inordinate amount of regulation on people across the country. And that puts our country at a significant disadvantage. You have Obamacare, you have the EPA just driving regulation like no tomorrow, and it's just it's killing jobs.
Matt Lloyd, thank you so much. We appreciate it. Come back anytime.
Thank
so
you,
much
Raphael.
to talk about. We appreciate it. Jason, now back to you.
Thank you, Raphael. We've been breaking news on Carrier for the past week on our official Twitter account at Indy This Week. So make sure to follow us to get that new information first. You're watching Indianapolis This Week only on RTV6.